Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Alicia Putnam. I'm the STEM Special Programs Coordinator here at GCC, and we are super excited to have you join us for a talk by Katie Coleman on the very first day of STEM Week. She is our kickoff speaker for a whole series of events that we have planned, so be sure to check out the GCC website to see what else is going on during the rest of the week. So I would like to introduce our new president, Dr. Eve Salomon Fernandez. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. All right, she didn't ask you to show a lot of energy, but I am a ball of fire. How many of you are excited to be here today? Woo! That's what I'm talking about. It's not every day that you get to meet an astronaut, right? Once in a lifetime experience. I am super excited that we have Dr. Katie Coleman, not just as someone who's visiting, but she is actually our resident astronaut. She is one of our trustees, and we get to brag about her all the time. And we are also delighted that she also gets to kick off our STEM week here. And before I introduce her, I also want to give some kudos to our members of our faculty and staff, our educators who have made all of today possible. Starting with the food in the back and the greetings and organizing everything. And of course, some kudos to Katie's assistant who also made today possible. So please give them a nice round of applause. All right. So this is the part where I get to brag a little bit about Katie. She's very modest, and I could say a whole lot more, but we agreed to keep it short on the introduction. So Dr. Katie Coleman is a chemist, a retired United States Air Force colonel, and a former NASA astronaut with more than 180 days in space. Impressive, right? And these days were accumulated during 2 space shuttle missions and a 6-month expedition to the International Space Station. She launched and landed aboard the Russian Soyuz spacecraft and acted as the lead robotics and lead science officer during her tenure aboard the ISS. She performed the second ever robotic capture of a supply ship from the station. In her spare time, she coached actress Sandra Bullock in preparation for Bullock's astronaut role in the movie Gravity. How awesome is that, right? She gets to rub shoulders with actors and actresses and really fun people we only get to see on TV. During her time on the ground at NASA, Katie served in a variety of roles within the astronaut office, including Chief of Robotics, lead for tile repair efforts after the Columbia accident, and lead astronaut for integration of supply ships from NASA's commercial partners, SpaceX and Orbital ATK. How often do we get a woman in this lead role? That's pretty significant. After returning from the space station, she led open innovation and public-private partnership efforts for the Office of the Chief Technologist at NASA before retiring from NASA after a 26-year career. So she spent more than a quarter century at NASA. That's pretty impressive. Katie is a Massachusetts graduate, earning her BS in chemistry from MIT and a PhD in polymer science and engineering from UMass Amherst. Commissioned as a second lieutenant in the US Air Force, she pioneered new materials for aviation as a research chemist before being selected as an astronaut in 1992. Currently, Katie is a public speaker advocating for inclusion in STEM and STEAM fields and on teams everywhere. She also serves as a consultant for microgravity research. She serves on several boards, including the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and of course, our own Greenfield Community College, DENT, The Future, and Skycatch, an innovative AI company that uses drones to provide decision-making data. She is an advisor to Earthrise Media, advocating for the use of photographs of Earth from space to provide both context and perspective for environmental and social justice issues. Katie lives right here in the Pioneer Valley with her husband, Josh Simpson, a glass artist, and their 2 sons. She is an amateur flute player, best known for her space duet with Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, and her work from space with the acclaimed Irish band the chieftains. So please join me with a warm applause in welcoming Dr. Katie Coleman to kick off our STEM Week.
Okay. Boy, that's quite an introduction. So now I'm nervous. So I really, I came to start off STEM Week. And it's important to everyone in this room and lots of people who aren't in this room. And those of you that are students and those of you that are going to be students, I see some younger students here. This is for you, but there's a whole bunch of people here at GCC, not just me on this stage, that are here for you. And I'm just the first one that gets to speak this week. But it's all celebrating, let me tell this thing to go. It's all celebrating STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math. Because those are really important things, whether it's something that you already love to do, like taking things apart and things like that, all of us have something to contribute to that field, and that's really why I'm here today. And I think it takes two things to be part of the STEM movement, so to speak, or the STEAM movement. I like to put an A in the middle for art, because I think that if we don't have visions that tell us how cool it's going to be to go, or to get there, or what we might do, then how do we know who should be on the team? How do people on the team, how do people out there know they should come help us if we can't create vision? And art really creates vision. So I think in order to be part of STEM and STEAM, you need to be brave and you need to be open. And that's really like the whole talk. And I'm going to show you kind of the way that at least works for me, and how I got to be on the stage here at a place that I'm very proud to be a part of, wearing a cool jumpsuit. At least I think it's cool, and running off to the airport to actually help my son look at colleges. And he was a student here at GCC this summer. He did the STEM courses with Alicia, and I will tell you, it is all about the people that bring you into this, where he's like, Mom, STEM. But he did want to take math. He wanted to come here and take math this summer. But he's like, I don't want to do this STEM thing. I'm not going to do engineering, Mom. I said, wait till you go and find out. And Alicia is like the coolest person to head up this program. It only took about 5 minutes with Alicia, maybe 2.5 or maybe 30 seconds for him to go, wow, she's like really interesting. And she thinks of really fun things, so maybe this STEM thing might not be so bad this summer, and he loved it. So we're not going to talk too much about the space shuttle, as I just call you Dr. Eve. Dr. Solomon Fernandez said, I flew twice on the shuttle. And to me, those were just getting me ready for the big mission, which was on the space station. And at the same time, I really loved every single minute in space. My first mission was 16 days doing science experiments. That's my original training, is to be a chemist. And then my second mission was launching the Chandra X-ray Observatory. This is the crew there. The woman in the middle is the first woman to be a commander of the space shuttle. And she's just this really, really neat woman. And I think that women have a different way of kind of seeing everybody on the team that makes teams work pretty well. And in fact, there's a lot of data that says that when you send men and women together to do tasks, you really get a lot more done. And in my experience, that's true. So those two missions were leading up to being on the space station. And everybody always feels bad, and some people say, that's probably not for me, because it's so tiny and close, and oh, that must be awful. So the secret is, it is just not small up there. Let me just see if I have there's my picture of my football field. So we don't actually live, we don't live here side to side, because that's where all the equipment is that needs to stay cold and outside. But we live here on the 50-yard line, all the way across it, and it's about like 10 train cars or large buses all hooked together, maybe straight in a row, some up, some down, but without the seats in them. So it's really this amazing, wonderful, awesome place. This is about a 4-minute little movie, and it shows the patches coming into play. There's 2 patches, and you see them on my suit here as well. And that's because when somebody like me is launching to the space station, I'm going with the Russians, and I'm going as a part of a group of 3, a team of 3. And when we get there, there's already 3 people, so then we become a team of 6. So that's the first patch, and we'll get to the second patch in a minute. It looks like animation there, but it's not. It is actual footage of the space shuttle. They have mixed in here kind of, this is where it's small and cramped, is in that little capsule. And I will say the hardest thing we physically do is the American spacesuit because it weighs 300 pounds. That's why we practice in a giant swimming pool. And then with all that practice and many, many years of getting ready, the three of us are going through all the really cool traditions of getting ready to launch. There's my husband Josh on the right there and my son Jamie. And now we're marching out to the launch pad. We promised each other to take short steps and go very slowly. Everybody was nervous and it didn't work out that way. I pretty much ran to the launch pad. We're waving. Actually, after the Russians have a tradition where they actually give you a kick in your bottom. And it's a serious kick. Good thing you're wearing a spacesuit. And now it's time for launch, which is the most amazing part. And I hear kids, it's like a family here, and so kids can, kids are kids, don't worry about it. Anyways, this is our little capsule, which is really a small thing, but fortunately the ride to space only takes 8.5 minutes. Then it takes about 6 hours to park, okay, because it's, tricky parallel parking. This is my favorite part of the whole entire movie, and that is flying through the space station, because that's what it's like every single minute of every single day. And in fact, when I'm doing what Dr. Eve talked about, capturing the second ever capture of a supply ship, that was really a big deal to do. And it's because we're going 17,500 miles an hour around the Earth, 16 times a day we go around the Earth.
I like your afro.
What's that?
You love your afro.
Do you like that? I had very good space hair, and in fact, I will tell you that I had short hair because I wanted to get my final kind of astronaut picture taken, and it just seemed like a grown-up would have short hair. I've since given up that theory, but so I had very short hair about 2 years before the mission, and I grew my hair, which grows pretty fast, on purpose long, so that in almost every picture it would at least be clear that women were up in space too. And excuse me, I think that's a really serious point that we'll get to it a little bit. While I was up there, we had a bunch of supply ships, but also the space shuttle bringing up the last piece of the space station. And so we're going to use the shuttle robotic arm and the station robotic arm. This right here, this circle thing right here, that's the part that actually is like the doorway attaching to our doorway or our hatch on the space station. This was the most nervous I was for the entire flight, probably, and it's because we're taking pictures of them, they're taking pictures of us, and they're very important pictures that help diagnose how's the space station, how is the space shuttle, is the space shuttle okay, can it go back and land after they've done their work with us? And so if you don't take those pictures correctly or out of focus, then we have to take them again, and then we're having robotic arms that are kind of like all going like this, and it's really difficult, and it takes time, and so we lose a day of our work if we have to do that. But there, the shuttle comes aboard. You saw my friend Nicole, also with long hair, so you can see her. It's like a family. We all know each other, all of the astronauts, and we're all different, just like everyone in your family is different as well. And we don't get to pick each other when we go on missions. It is very much all about the mission. See our little tiger there? And this is the robot. I tell people the robot is the one on the left, because Scott is kind of serious. And a little more of just flying through the space station. And for me, those of you who know me better know that I'm just not the most graceful person on this entire planet, and that's why I leave, okay? Because up in space, I am really graceful, and it's really fun. Check out my feet. Look how we sort of, when we want to hang out in one place, we actually tuck our feet under these handrails, just like you'd have on a stairway, but we have them all over the whole space station, so we can kind of walk around, so to speak. So we come back actually with calluses on the tops of our feet. So this slide, which is kind of fun, this is Scott with, I think, oranges and apples, but this slide shows you scientifically why we go to space. And it's because everything is floating around. And if you give it a push, it is flying around. And it leads to some very fun eating. I've been showing this for a lot of my career. These actually were... And I let it go again because I really like it. You know, it's not as if we knew that gummy bears would be the best. I am a scientist, and so I brought gummy worms and gummy dinosaurs and Swedish fish, but the bears were the best. But this is what water looks like up there if you just let it be free. It's not going to be a puddle in your glass. It's going to be the shape of a sphere because surface tension is the strongest force, way bigger than anything else up there. Whereas down here, surface tension, we still have it. It's the same value down here, but gravity is so much bigger that everything's going to sit in your glass. But when you go home tonight and you're eating dinner and you look at a glass of whatever you have, you're going to see that the liquid actually kind of curves up the side. And there's a big battle going on there where the water molecules or whatever milk molecules or whatever they are, they all really like each other, but they also really like to climb up the wall. But then gravity makes them be down. And so there's really this like, yes, no, and going on. And up in space, we get to see what do the liquids really want to do. And it's important for us here on the ground because it helps us understand the forces, like for every process that involves flow through a pipe. That's a factory, that's sewage, that's a river, that's our pipes. All those things involve flow-through pipes, and the tiny forces are still there and they make a difference, but they're really hard to measure down here, and we get to look at them in a different way. Just like combustion here, on the left is the candle flame, down here on Earth, and on the right is the one in space. And here, just your ordinary candle flame, there's again a lot going on, and it's hard. Oops. It's hard to understand all the different pieces when it's all happening at once. And so in your ordinary candle flame, you have gas, things are being burned, there's lighter gases, they're rising just like hot air balloons, and then new fuel is coming in, and this is going on, and it's really a very fast process. And you have to make measurements that determine the slope of a line in less than a second. So in milliseconds, you're making measurements here. Well, over here, this is our space flame. We're still making lighter gases, but the lighter gases, heavier gases, it doesn't matter. They're not going to go up lighter, heavier, everything is weightless. So there's not that kind of motion. New fuel isn't coming in as fast. And so we get to make those same measurements here over 30 or 40 seconds. So it gives us a different way to look. It's like having a different lens or a different pair of glasses to understand what's going on with combustion, which is of course really important for understanding pollution and understanding how pollution is formed and understanding energy, how to make things burn more efficiently, all really important Earth questions. And this is a space flame in action. And you can see that it's a sphere. Let's see, and we also do a lot of plant research. Everyone on this flight, this is an early flight where we're growing plants in Jello, trying to figure out how are we going to eat on the way to Mars and when we get there. And everyone was horrified when I was in charge of the plants because if you've been to my house, at least the one when then there are no living things inside the house. And the real story is that our cat eats them and then throws up. Okay, but I'm also not the best with plants. But it turns out my job on this flight was that every day my job was to kill a plant. So that we'd know, how were they on the first day, on the second day, what happened by day 3. And so we would freeze them and, do all sorts of mean things to them. So I was pretty good at that, and I really liked it. I'll show you this picture here. This is me and in a pink shirt, and it's just kind of overall kind of an appealing picture, I think. And I'll tell you this because I think it brings up our A for art, in that you see a picture like this, and you'll actually see this on giant NASA posters everywhere. And the only reason it was taken was because I insisted. Okay, it was on a shuttle flight. There were 5 of us, and the person who would take the picture was a person who hadn't been to space before. And I said, hey, so take a picture of me doing this plant thing. And I said, but I need 5 minutes. I'm going to set up some lights so we have enough light. And he's like, hey, we're just going to take a picture. I said, pictures are really important because they tell the story to other people, and they help everybody realize what we're doing up here. And by taking just that extra 5 minutes to set up a light, to have some lighting, by being one of the people on the space mission that just might think to wear a shirt of some color besides black, white, or gray, it's a good picture. And it takes, so that's sort of that being brave and being open. And candidly, he wasn't all that open to that. And then later on, we had a conversation, which I admired him very much for bringing up, where he said, you were right about a bunch of things, and I did not give you that benefit of the doubt. And I was like, wrong. And you saved me like a whole bunch of times on that flight. And I'm not just bragging, but I think it's actually interesting when somebody, sort of big and tough says, hey, you taught me something, I've thought about this. And it's never too late to go back and say those things. And then just the use of tools. And I'm going to talk for about probably 20 more minutes. And then we're definitely going to have time for questions. And since we're like a family here, there's no silly questions. And the ones you have, everybody else wants to know, so be thinking of them. But I like this picture because it shows me fixing things, which I never did down here on the ground. I mean, in my family, I knew how to fix things, and that was you picked up that instrument that some of you may not recognize. It's called a telephone. So you pick it up, you call someone, and they come to your house, and they fix the air conditioning or the plumbing or whatever, usually a guy, right? And yet up on the space station, that is not gonna work, and we all had to be good at these things. And I was actually in charge of fixing things, especially the toilet, and also all the sort of equipment like that had to do with keeping us alive. And so it turns out you have to learn how to use tools, not that hard, and you have to follow the directions for fixing things, but also you have to sort of own what you know and what you don't know. And instead of being like, well, I've learned how to fix things, so now I know how to fix them now. I mean, I do not have 30 years of being able to look at a motor and take it apart and really have a sense for what goes on, not even that I can explain, but I just kind of know. I don't have that. And so if I've got somebody next to me who's doing something else, but I bring them in periodically, go, hey, so I'm doing this and this and this, and I'm thinking this is what's going on. What do you think? I'd like to say I did it all by myself, but it's not the right thing. But notice that it is very important when you're fixing things to be having the right accessories. And let's see if this is going to work. See those earrings? Nuts and bolts earrings, purchased right over in Shelburne, by the way. Okay, and a little bit about about robotics. I was the chief of robotics, which I was very proud of. And it just turns out I didn't actually play a lot of video games growing up, but I caught up pretty quickly. And you'll see my son's Tiger here. This is something I was allowed to bring to space, and we put him in a lot of the pictures because kids like to understand, what happens to the tiger up there. So there's a lot of cool video of the tiger up there, and so there was robotics, and there was also spacewalking, which for me was the hardest thing because I was a smaller person, and it's about learning how to do it differently. And again, being brave enough to go, hey, you didn't think I was big enough to do that, but it turns out I am. And so just showing up to meetings where it's not like they didn't invite you on purpose. It just never occurred to them that actually you could really be useful on that team. And it may not feel fair. In fact, it doesn't feel fair. But sometimes you have to invite yourself. And sometimes you have to invite yourself way more times than once. But if you think you should be on the team, then show up. Be brave and look around, try to get those other people and figure out how to make them be open to seeing you. And at the same time, if you're one of the other people, be open to seeing the people that are showing up at the door. I'll say that doing things like this, capturing this supply ship, it weighs, that thing weighed, I think, 16 tons. It's the size of a school bus, and doing it on the space station is a really big deal because when the shuttle used to go up and maybe grab the Hubble Space Telescope and fix it and let it go, they're two sort of airplane-sized things. But the space station is the size of a factory, and then the supply ship is the size of a truck. So if something goes wrong, you can't move the factory. It's just too slow. So it has to be done really, really carefully. And so that was, I was really proud of pioneering some of the work to do that. But to do that, I had to learn to work with Paolo. And I think in this picture, you can see that Paolo, who's from Italy, is probably pretty easy to get to know. But when you do something big and important together, where it's more important than whether you picked each other, whether you're friends, whether you like each other, whether you appreciate each other, doing this successfully and not having a crash was really, really important. And so it's my job. I mean, Paolo is actually pretty easy to get to know, although he's Italian. And it turned out, I mean, he looks so fun, but it turns out if you really want to understand something that Paolo thinks is important or how Paolo's really doing, you have to eat with him. It has to be lunch, or dinner. I mean, I was used to being at the Space Center, and I would drive around to the different places where I had to learn things, and I had a box of granola bars in my car, and if it's not summer, I had yogurt and I had water, and that's enough for me because I'm efficient, and running around. And he goes, lunch. I'm like, I'll just meet you there. He goes, we have to eat. And it turns out even in space, that's where you really find out how is Paulo's day. And it's really important when you have to do something really big together to understand how each other are doing. That kind of connection, like how to find that place where you connect with somebody, is also for me very easy with my friend Nicole. We have kids about the same age. We're both small people in the spacesuit and determined to win at that. So we had a lot in common, and it's really easy to make that connection. Now, Scott, we're pretty different, right? And finding a way that we would connect, because it's easy to go, he's so grumpy, doesn't talk very much, and we're just so different. And we actually really had sort of a joke together where basically Scott very seldom ever wore any shirt that had any color in it besides black, or maybe hunter green was way out on the edge for him. And so we're just different in a lot of different ways. And even in terms of, is it okay when you're going to document something, he's not the same guy I talked about before, but is one picture enough? I mean, if you're a photographer, you know that one picture is never enough. And if part of the mission is sharing and making sure the mission continues, you need a lot of pictures. And Scott and I talked about that. He's a pretty serious guy, and he's a man of few words. But I wasn't really looking forward to being up there with him. No, I mean, I wasn't like, oh, that's got to be terrible. I just thought, probably not going to be my best friend, And it turns out that in some ways, because we're not best friends, we had this really great relationship where this guy, even though he doesn't look like it, was the king of non-judgmental feedback. Where instead of going, Katie, when you do those things, you are so slow, speed it up, okay? He said, I've noticed when you do those kind of experiments, we have a lot of equipment, you're like really fast in the middle. But in the beginning, you're slow, and in the end, you're slow. And I think it's because when you get stuff out and everything is kind of floating around and you're tacking it down or putting it on tape, or you're putting stuff kind of in all these different places. And this might not work for you, but what works for me is to put everything wherever I am in the space station, even if I've decided that I'm here and I'm going to work here or upside down, I'm always going to put everything on the left and just have it all on one side, and see if that makes it easier and faster to both clean up and get everything out and ready. And so it was interesting to see what skills people brought. Letting people surprise you. It's really hard. It's a lot easier to complain about them, especially if you're like at home, your family, those things. But if you let somebody surprise you, then it's a really big benefit to the team. And so my job was to see where is this guy? This guy who's fun, and this guy who has this kind of like funny part inside. And when he went to leave the space station, remember I said there's 3 people up there, 3 come, now we're 6. Then 3 people go home, 3 more come, and now we're a different 6. That's why we're 2 different patches. So when he went to leave, I looked at him, I go, I'm gonna miss you. And he looked at me and goes, I'm gonna miss you too. And then when R3 landed, only a few people get to be there, and Scott was at the bottom of the stairs of the airplane. We land in Russia, and then we fly in planes back here, or back to Texas. And he was at the bottom of the stairs, and he goes, well, I had to make sure you and Paulo got home, So it's interesting to me what it takes in order to make things work together. For somebody, this is Al Drew, he and I didn't know each other particularly well, and we didn't have a chance to practice very much together before we left the Earth. And so we ended up having to, really just like look at each other, and, we did some practicing up there. There's some things that went well and some things that, I'm like, hey, I'm in charge here of this because I'm like the robotics person, and you're going too fast for me. And he's like, well, we have a lot to do. I said, well, if it's too fast for me, then it's too fast for us. And so, maybe there's a way for you to talk more about what you're doing, or, show me where you are on the page so that we just communicate more about where we are, and that way it'll be faster. So you have to have those conversations, even though they're not easy. And you can tell it turned out pretty well. This is Al's first spacewalk. And this is my favorite picture, actually, of almost any that are on orbit. It's a completely spontaneous picture. I was there with a big camera, and I was going to take pictures of Al's gloves, which is part of what we do when they come in from a spacewalk to see if there's any little holes or anything like that. And you know, he's just so excited and so pleased that their spacewalk had gone so well. He just like grabbed me, you know, in this really wonderful, great way. And we each get to leave something at the astronaut office that we think the rest of the astronaut family should think about. And this is the picture that I left, because I think that this is what you should figure out how to do, especially when it doesn't start that way. So how to do that? How do you see each other? We talked about making connections. I think one of the ways to do that is to try to look at each other differently. And some of that is maybe to ask each other different questions. And this is whether it's, you know, somebody in your class. You know, I heard different things from my son about school this summer, like, oh, and he was in the class with a friend, so they were like chit, 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 chit. And they would go, well, you know, those people, they're quiet. I'm like, you have no idea who those people are. Have you talked to them? Have you asked them like where they come from? Have you asked them whether they're worried about math or whether they're excited about math? Is it easy or hard? You know, so you really have to like figure out how to see people. And one way to do that, can you see me in this picture? I mean, because of the big hair, right? But you have to kind of, if you turn a little sideways, I look a little bit more like me. But here, you see me right away, right? And it's because we're used to looking at people a certain way. You know, and we're used to looking at them up and down. And then when we suddenly get to a place where up and down are different, I'm going to just show you that again, where there is really no up and down, we have to look at each other a little bit differently. And so I've been showing people this slide from Hidden Figures. This is Katherine Johnson, whose name is actually Katherine Coleman Johnson. So we share a name, which I think is really wonderful. She is a famed mathematician who was the person in charge of calculating the trajectories of getting to the moon and back. And that included the Mercury, the Gemini, the Apollo flights, and the space shuttle. This woman was in charge of doing that. And in fact, the story that I understand is very true is that when John Glenn was going to make his very famous flight, it was right about the time that those IBM computers were just starting to be used, the ones that like took up a big, you know, almost the room, and people weren't sure whether to trust them or not. And the computers came up with like two different answers. And John Glenn said, you know, I'm not getting in that spacecraft, not until that woman, the smart one, does that calculation, because they'd been in meetings where she clearly was the person that knew what she was doing. And yet, so we call this movie Hidden Figures, but in this picture here, what I see is a woman of color. In almost every scene in the movie, she's wearing a dress of color, and she's in a sea of white guys in white shirts and skinny black ties. There is nothing hidden about this woman, but she wasn't seen. And my purpose in talking about it today is not so much looking back, but really looking forward, because I think in every group that you're in, whether it's your carpool or your class, your family, who you talk to in the neighborhood, everyone feels different. It feels like there's parts of them that people don't see, and that if people could really see who you were, well, who knows where we'd be. I think it's pretty exciting to understand what talents people bring, and it's not an easy thing to bring them all to the surface. And it takes all of us really trying. I think another way to do that is to be brave and open about the talents that you bring, or the lack of talent that you bring. I mean, I'm a reasonable flute player. I'm actually a reasonable silver flute player. The Irish flute is actually was quite new for me, and it took a lot of bravery to play it up in space, because you know if you play your flute in space, people are going to hear about it, and it's going to be on TV or in the internet or those kinds of things. This flute is a flute that was made 150 years ago. It's an Irish flute, and then a penny whistle. Those two flutes belong to the Chieftains. And then this one belongs to Ian Anderson of the group Jethro Tull. And I really loved, I brought his flute up to space. I was allowed to, because I really love the fact that he brought the flute to rock music. And suddenly people like me could play in all sorts of cool music and not just classical. So this is Jethro Tull, for those of you that might know him. And I think this is a collaboration that took being brave and being open. We'd actually never met when we did this. And we, I sent his flute, and we chatted a little bit back and forth on the internet. And he said, what if you do this and I do this? And I wrote back, I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, I did, I really didn't. And I'm like, do I tell him that? He's gonna think I know nothing. But you know, we had like a day to do this, and that included practicing.
Thanks, Colonel Catherine Coleman in the International Space Station. We should remember that today's cosmonauts, scientists, and astronauts are still every bit the rocket heroes they were 50 years ago. So, from the cultural city of Perm in Russia, let's salute Katie, Dima, and Paolo up there in orbit, and of course, the legendary Yuri Gagarin. Go safely.
Isn't that cool? So the first time that video played was on April 12th, 2011, and that was the 50th anniversary of human spaceflight. In other words, it was 50 years to the day that Yuri Gagarin had launched from Baikonur, from the same launch pad that we launched from. And so I thought it was really neat that so Ian Anderson was playing a concert in Russia, and I was on the space station, and we did this together. So it's really neat. And so I think it takes looking for those things that people bring that are unexpected and celebrating them in whatever spirit they're brought to the table. And I think that's how we make a crew like this. I want to show you a little bit about living in space, and then we'll look at the Earth a little bit, and then of course will show you shots of my family, because it's my right as the person on the stage. And then we'll be done. But this is living in space. This is my friend Mike. He's washing his hair, a little easier for him, but I will tell you, I still can do mine in about 5 minutes. This is our sleeping bags where we sleep. We kind of slither in like snakes. You could be upside down, right side up. I sleep kind of curled up at a little ball. And when you wake up in the morning, you might be like underneath, looking at the bottom of your computer table or something. Mike is fixing things. The good news is the Russians sent fresh fruit up on the space station. Bad news, it was onions. Which they really liked, okay? They were really excited. And then I like this. It looks like these guys are moving backwards, but think of it differently. They are actually still, and the space station is moving forwards. And every once in a while we do that, where we actually light the engines on the back of the space station. But this is why I showed you this clip, because this is my favorite little thing. This is Satoshi. And Satoshi is really very quiet Japanese astronaut. Loves baseball, but everybody's busy, so Satoshi has to be like the whole team. So, you know, he's pitching, and then he's batting, and then he's catching. And now look so it looks like they're diving, but this is different than when you dive off of a swimming pool, because when you have gravity, you launch horizontal, and then whoo, there you go. Whereas we have to actually work our way around the curve there. And it takes a little practice. Yep. Let's see. And I did want to show. I know we've got some kids in the bathroom or in the audience, and it's funny. Well, so this is, yep. So this is the part everyone is worried about, right? So this is the part that I like to show, and I like to demonstrate, because we talk at NASA. We talk about it all day. I'm like, let's make movies. And so these are chocolate-covered candies. This is so what happens is we have what looks like a toilet, and it's got a plastic bag that is like pulled over the mouth of the toilet, and with a little red thing at the back there. And so when you're done, when everything yucky is in there, then you're gonna like pull up on the top, and the top goes shoop, like this, and you poke that down, and everything bad goes down below into a can, collected, okay? But the way that it works, which is important, and there's a big STEM thing, is that there's holes in that bag. And that seems very anti-intuitive, to have holes in the bag of yucky stuff, right? And yet we need those holes so that the fan can draw everything in there. It's not like a fan, like whoosh. It's just like a little gentle breeze. That's all it takes to move anything up there in space. And so that fan helps everything go in the right place. And it's the same idea for peeing, really, which is that we have a hose and we have a funnel on it, and everyone can just point in that direction, and everything is drawn in with a little fan, not like this, but just a little gentle breeze makes everything go in the right place. But in the case of urine, it actually goes into this big pot. It goes through all these big filters, in and out, and it comes out like really like right over there, and we drink it, which. Yes, yes, yes. And truthfully, it was the most wonderful water you could imagine. Well, but you know, yes. Well, okay. So there's a lot of good news and there's bad news here. Okay. And you can just watch that. But the good news is that science and engineering are beautiful things. I mean, P is like, and there's some number, and you should look it up so you know it, but it's like, 98% beautiful, pure, sterile water, and like 2%, ooh, who wants that, right? And it's actually not that hard to pull all that stuff out of there, and it happens right down here on Earth as well, in several different ways. There's everything from rain going through the sky, going through the ground, ending up in the rivers. I mean, that's our natural filters, right? Then there's also sewage plants, waste treatment plants. It's just that they're further away, and you don't have to fix them when they stop working. So usually I don't put that in there, but I figured we would want to have a little bit of that. So a few pictures of the Earth. I mean, just some perspective. I mean, this is the shuttle took this picture of the space station with the Earth. So you can see that we're not like way off in space where we see the whole Earth, because that was what those pictures where you see the whole Earth, those were taken on the way to the moon or the way back from the moon. And so we're actually closer, so we can see the edge of the Earth there. And we look out of our big giant window, which is wonderful for us to have a window where we can really see. And we can see hurricanes. We can see Italy, indeed shaped like a boot. Yes. Aurora australis, just like Aurora borealis, which we actually see here sometimes, but in the southern hemisphere. And check that out. Who knew that we had so many neighbors? Now, I felt very fortunate to be from a place that is very geographically distinct. The first time I went to space, I actually flew with a guy from Massachusetts who was from Worcester Polytech. And he had a very distinctive accent that some of you may either know or share. And when we first looked at Massachusetts together, looking down, seeing Cape Cod, he looks down, he goes, "Oh my gosh, it looks just like the map." True statement. He's a wonderful guy. But look at all these neighbors. I mean, Canada is right there. And this is Boston, Cape Cod. This is Newport. I think this is Hartford. This is Providence here. Hartford's over here. Isn't that neat? And we see it in all different lights. And it's sunset, it's sunrise, and in 90 minutes we'll be back. I mean, I don't see the same spot every 90 minutes because the Earth is turning, right? But within a day or two, I'll be back. And then sooner or later, after almost 6 months, I would have stayed another 6 months in a minute because I really loved it up there. It's time to come home, and it's time for landing. And this is me about half an hour after climbing out of the capsule, and I'm talking to my family, who I did get to talk to almost every day, but about 3 of that 6 months. I got to say hi to Jamie and Josh and Josiah up in Shelburne. NASA puts like a telecommunications kind of actually really more old-fashioned than what any of you have as your webcam, right? But still, it let me, on every Sunday, I would get to have a video conference with them, and they would bring people over, and I'd get to say hi to everybody, and I'd take the little webcam on orbit, and I'd put it out the window so people could see the Earth going by, and it was really, really fun to be able to be in touch with your family and be home. And there's something really special about coming home. Those of you that know my son know he looks nothing like this right now, but this is when we came home, and he was 10. And it really takes a whole big family to make something like this work, where this is my husband, Josh. Many of you know him better than you know me. Dr. Eve was talking about doing this for 26 years or 24 years, or I get it mixed up, but at NASA. And that was all while being a part-time resident of Shelburne. So I commuted between Shelburne and Houston, between Hartford and Houston in terms of airports, for 26 years, which is really a long, long time. And you wouldn't think that I would still race to the airport, but I am actually doing that tonight, which is why Dr. Solomon Hernandez is being really nice about getting me out of here. Anyways, but it takes the whole family. And my husband is a nut. And if he fit in my spacesuit, there's no question that somebody with a mustache would have been on that space station. He really loves space. And this is where, I think that there's a lot that people have in common. People who like to explore. We explore in different ways, every one of us, whether it's exploring how do I get, somebody in a classroom to understand something I really think that they need to know, or how do I make something that people understand that we have a future, even not just on this planet, but other places as well. And so Josh is really well known for making these glass planets. They go from small to large. It's funny for me to talk to you because I think all of you are pretty familiar with him. Often I'm talking somewhere else where folks are not. But I loved his planets. He made them a dozen years before we ever met. Then we met, and I really loved them. And I had actually bought them long before we ever met, but that got very expensive, so then we got married. Oops, let me go back, because this one I really love. This one looks like a Saturn. And it's just a different way of thinking about, where are we going? Why would we go? What are we going to do there? And will it be fun? And he's really inspired by Hubble Space Telescope photos and other photos like from the Chandra, where the images that they have, and I encourage you to go to some of those websites because they're really beautiful, and they have really good explanations that I go to, like the Chandra X-ray Observatory. It'll say, why X-rays? Why are they important? Oh, important because of learning about black holes. Why are black holes important? And I like it when people explain things to me in plain English, and a lot of those websites have really great people dedicated to doing just that. And so it's pretty cool to explore, but it is great to come home and to realize that, the future is about exploration, but exploration starts in the classroom. Fortunately, our confused cat, for the mom who went to space, it's actually really hard to go. And people don't ask the guys if they mind going, but they do ask the women. And it's an injustice to the guys and to the women because all of us really, really mind. But when you know that the trusty cat is going to be with your son the whole time, it makes it a little bit easier. That son is now grown up. He's just turned 18. And actually this morning I didn't put him, he got in one of our cars and drove himself to the airport and flew by himself for the first time down to Washington, D.C. And everything still seems okay. I haven't gotten any big texts, have I, Shira? No? Anyways, but this is where you start, this curious thing. And this is back to the being brave part, where when you have something that you think is cool, show it to somebody. Because they'll probably think it's cool too, and they might not have noticed it, and it might not be their thing to notice things that way. And so, don't lose that spirit of, I found this, or I know this, or I can do this, and showing it to somebody, because you never know. They might be doing something really interesting and they just haven't been very loud about what they're looking for or who they're looking for. And so when I look at the Earth, and this is actually my friend Tracy, not me, but when we look back at the Earth, to us it's really clear that there's a crew back here. There's a crew of Spaceship Earth, and all of us are on that crew. And just as space travelers, we have a mission to really get to know each other and make the mission is more important than whether we like each other or not. There's that same kind of mission right back here on Spaceship Earth. And we have other places to go, very exciting places in that. And this is back to the STEM program where we're going to these places. And people from here should be part of that team. Every single person can be contributing to what happens on a Mars mission, on a planetary mission, on figuring out how we're going to live there, what we're going to be like, how we're going to help each other, how we're not going to help each other, all those kinds of things. And there's a lot of really important work to do between now and then. But for now, I think it's really important to realize that we are that crew, and learning to be a citizen of that crew, learning to be a member of that crew, and figuring out what you can contribute. This is a really great place to do that. So, thank you.